Hi y'all, we are back with another episode of Tigress, and again I'm here in studio with my beautiful, beautiful sisters. Say hey y'all.
Hi.
Do you want to introduce yourselves?
My name's Nadya Okamoto. I'm the middle.
I'm Isa. I'm the youngest.
She's the baby. And today we're going to be talking about something that is definitely a heavy topic and one that I think we're very much still always going to be healing through, and that is eating disorders, disordered eating, and how that has played a role in our own lives and our healing journeys, but also how it's affected our sister relationships. So we know that this is a really hard topic to talk about, and I think especially as survivors ourselves, we're going to just be really open and honest about our experiences. And so just a little bit of a trigger warning on that. Of course, we'll share resources on our Tigress page on Instagram, and I'll share it on mine on Instagram and TikTok as this episode comes out. But we just want to make sure we give you that heads up. And if you need to take some time, skip some parts, or skip this episode altogether, we will not be mad. Do what you got to do to take care of yourself. But yeah, with that, we're going to be talking a little bit about that journey. So this is also something I don't think I've ever talked about with each other in depth. I think we've always had these small conversations about it, but all three of us together we haven't talked about. And actually in passing, after we recorded an episode together with me and Amaya, she actually turned to me and she said, I actually didn't know you had an eating disorder. And I was like, oh, awkward, awkward. And a lot of it was because I think, we did grow up feeling pigeonholed in so many parts of our lives by our parents, where like one was a hot one was a beautiful one was the smart one was the stupid one. And that also pertained to mental health, where one was anxious, one was depressed, and one had an eating disorder. And primarily the one with the eating disorder was Amaya, who was partially hospitalized, and I'll let you tell that story. But yeah, I think that at the same time, Amaya and I both struggled with different forms of eating disorders over the last decade or so, and Isa, the youngest one of us, had to step into some pretty adult shoes of being a caretaker and the person on suicide watch, or the person who had to be in the bathroom supervising me when I took a shower at a really, really young age. And we're going to kind of talk through all of that. So maybe to kick off, Amaya, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience and kind of what you have healed from and are working through now?
The whole shebang?
Yeah, I think high level, but enough details that they can get kind of the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts, yeah, sure. I think that a lot of, maybe, I want to say like immigrant families, but I'll just, because like Asian American families, there's a lot of, talking about like, okay, clean plate club, right? You like never leave any food on the plate. And me and Nadya still make jokes about, when you move and you from a different country, you don't have a lot of money, you like eat everything, and we grew up with not a lot of resources, so we were taught to kind of eat everything, finish everything. We watered down our milk when we were younger, we had to apologize if we spilled food, if we left food on our plate. And so we grew up with a kind of like a
scarcity mindset,
yeah. And throughout all the fighting and all the tension and all the drama when we were younger, for me, food was a huge source of comfort. Food and reading. It was always food and reading. If I was, I remember, my earliest memories was like waking up early while everyone was asleep, so I could go in and like sneak into the fridge and like eat the tops off the watermelons or eat the corners of all the sugar cookies. And food was always a huge part of my comfort. And as things escalated, I think especially right after our parents divorced and separated, that comfort just took over my entire life, and I ended up gaining a ton of weight at a very early age. And I was clinically obese, as my doctor told me, little tiny Amaya in 3rd grade. I was clinically diagnosed, and that I needed to make some lifestyle changes. I've always hated working out. It's just basically, it's so hard to explain, right? I was so young, but I ended up having anorexia in 6th grade, which is crazy. Like, you can see it's almost jumbled for me talking. Like, I'm already getting emotional because it's so hard for me to already crying.
Well,
like,
it
it's
makes
okay.
sense that it was jumbled because also eating disorders are like a mental illness, and so like a lot of it is mixed up for you, just like mentally.
Yeah, I mean, I
Like,
didn't even expect this to become like an emotional, because I am so used to talking about my eating disorder and educating people about it. But it's really hard when I start mapping out how, how does an 11-year-old become anorexic? How the fuck does that happen? I've struggled with an eating disorder for over half my life now. When I was hospitalized, the first thing that we were taught was we're not allowed to talk about numbers. I don't know if I'm allowed to share here, but, by I was 11, 12 years old, I dropped under, 100 pounds, maybe a lot under 100 pounds. Yeah, it was really terrifying. But for me,
it was a mix of anorexia and bulimia.
Yeah, what ended up happening for me was, and I think this is kind of a warning for anyone out there, I was actively trying to lose weight. I was forced to be a part of the swim team. I was forced to work out a lot by my mother and by, doctors, and it was so hard for me. To this day, I hate working out. Am I ranting?
No.
It was really hard to work out. I ended up getting sick, and I could not keep my food down. And during that time, I ended up dropping a ton of weight, and I was like, this is my easy way out. I went back to school, and like the first day I got back, I remember the boy I had a massive crush on was like, "You're looking good, Amaya," and I was in 7th grade. Yeah, and by that time I was completely hooked. And then I oscillated between anorexia nervosa and bulimia, binge purge, for the next couple years, and it remained hidden for years.
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
Most people.
Yeah, for most people. And I think Issa has her own perspective, because she was for a long time the only person who knew that I was doing things with food and with my body that I really shouldn't. And for me, like, I can barely wake up before noon nowadays, but by early middle school and throughout early high school, I was waking up at like 4 or 5 a.m. to work out. I was planning my food. I somehow convinced my mom to let me be in charge of cooking everyone breakfast, packing everyone lunch, and like planning our dinners and what we bought for the dinner table. So then I had complete control. And then I could tell also everyone that I already ate, while I was cooking, so that I didn't have to eat dinner. Like, there's a lot of all these strategies that we learn, and that major trigger warning on this, because I think that it's hard to talk about eating disorders without also having a fear that you're giving someone ideas. But yeah, I mean, there's so much I could just keep going. But
it kind of culminated when you were freshman in high school and had to be admitted into like partial hospitalization.
I wish I was a sophomore. And by that time, it had progressed to a very intense amount. I was, using Jergens self-tanning lotion in secret, that so that I would cover up the fact that I was so pale. I had extremely thin hair. I was fainting in between classes. I was skipping class. I was skipping classes to go work out. Like, it was really bad. And it got to the point when, I looked in the mirror and I was like, if I don't do something about this, like, I'm going to die. And I asked my mom if she would help me, and I actually ended up in very Okamoto fashion. I signed up, so dramatic. I signed up to do like a cocoon talk, and I planned out an entire 10-minute talk about kind of coming out about my eating disorder. And I told my whole school that I have an eating disorder, and then I dropped the bomb. Like 2 days later, I sent a mass school-wide email that was like, so I'm leaving for a semester. And I'm going to go join a partial hospitalization program. And I sent them a link to my program and a bunch of links about,
To the whole school?
Okay,
to
so
my
this
class.
This is what we were talking about last episode, where I transferred to that school.
Yeah. So I dropped a lot of...
You told the whole student body?
I told at least my class, I think.
Oh, wow.
I literally sent a mass email because, we went to a really small school. It
tiny.
was super tiny. My graduating class was 74 kids. And so if someone goes missing for a day, everyone knows, right? And I think my motivation at 15 years old, 15 years old was to just get ahead of the game. And I knew that, people were already like finding out that I was like at Cartini, which is an amazing program. Hated it while I was there, but completely changed my life. And I left school for 4 or 5 months.
And you didn't take time off, or you did take time off?
I took time off
from school.
And I had the immense privilege. In retrospect, I wish I had taken the year off and redone my sophomore year. completely. I think it's completely valid, super important to take time off. You know, mental health, I think that, you know, our system kind of pushes this timeline, our society pushes this timeline, you know, graduate at 18, get to college, whatever. But I think that a year off would have been incredibly important for me to reset. And I ended up having to take a gap year to do that anyway. And a lot of my gap year after I graduated was doing recon about, you know, how do I learn how to eat on my own, because I did not take a year off. At the same time, I was incredibly lucky I was not in the public school system. And what that meant was Catlin Gable did make crazy exceptions for me. And when I got back to school midway through the spring semester, they did not ask me to make up work. I was super behind. There's a lot of holes in my education from that year, but I was able to graduate on time.
Yeah, and I think what was also powerful about it is after you sent that email, there were so many other students who came out about having eating disorders at the same school.
Oh my God, I just totally got shivers. Yeah, after me, it was just us.
Even going to the same program.
At my specific program, just the dominoes started to fall, and literally, I think there are 4 or 5 girls in the years after me, while I was still at that school, who ended up at Cartini.
So I feel like a lot of your, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your disordered eating tendencies were kind of motivated by one, wanting control, and then also kind of this body image thing, right? Which is like being told you were clinically obese and also wanting to fit in socially. Yeah,
and there are layers, right? Like there's so much to unpack because there's so much going on, but what, you know, I think just going back, like it wasn't even just finding comfort in eating, right? Like for me, putting on weight was very much in reaction to the fact that Nadya got so much sexual attention from our biological father because of the way that her body was developing and her body looked. And as a confused baby, right? Like I was like 6, 7 years old, like so young. I don't even want to say it. I had the feelings of jealousy, you know, the kernels of jealousy there, but also like the kernels of knowing what was happening was wrong and gross and I didn't want to be a part of it, and putting on weight in the exact, you know, reaction to somebody who did not have a lot of weight on them. And putting a lot of weight on my prepubescent body was like a layer of protection, right? I'm not going to get touched, right? Things aren't going to happen that I don't want, you know. Taking ownership. And I think that a lot of people who develop eating disorders, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, especially, right, anyone can have an eating disorder. A lot of the people who kind of go back and talk about their motivation, so much of it is about control. And for me, that control was an attempt to take control over multiple facets of my life, whether it was my father or my social life or the way that I felt in, you know, comparison to my older sister's body, or feeling unattractive, you know, at a middle school where I felt incredibly unattractive as kind of like an overweight, artsy, moody Asian girl.
Yeah. And Issa, where were you in kind of Amanda's journey? Because I know you were very present as well.
Well, when you said that everyone was asleep when you were stealing cookies or making food, and not everyone was asleep, like, I have an obsession with pastries, and a healthy one, because when you were up at 4 or 5 a.m., like, making breads and cookies and cupcakes, I was usually, like, the taster. So, like, I kind of had a healthy relationship with food, because I feel like when you were going through eating disorder, like, extreme mass production of cookies and stuff like that, as the youngest, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I have all this endless, like, access to pastries and goodies and stuff like that. But then it was when I saw you kind of running between the kitchen and the bathroom when I was like, something's up. And then
did you know that she was throwing up?
Yeah, I would catch Amaya throwing up, or Amaya would come back to the kitchen with vomit on her mouth, or I would smell it. And there are several instances that we've had talked about this in therapy a little bit, but like I would catch Amaya and she'd get really violent about me not telling anyone, or specifically slamming my fingers in like the bathroom door, because I like wouldn't let her be alone in the bathroom, and like I would try to you know, like keep the door open, and you'd slam it shut on my fingers. And so there were multiple instances like that. And then when we went out in public, I would kind of just take the role, because I didn't really know what was happening, but I knew that, you know, I needed to help you, and I just didn't know how because I was so young. And so I would just kind of always tag along with you to the bathroom, but at a lot of times when you were throwing up and I was trying to stop you, you would get very angry and violent. And Nadya, at a very early age, I saw your eating disorder as well, just because I kind of caught on, like, after I ate, I didn't really want to throw up. And so I was like, why are my sisters throwing up? And then you started getting extremely pale, and I would literally... There's a running joke in our family that Amaya just falls asleep everywhere. That when we get home and we're taking off our shoes, we have several photos because our family thought it was a joke that Amaya would just fall asleep on the floor, or that we would come home from school and like off of the bus, and Amaya would just fall asleep immediately and wake up at 5 a.m. and then do her cooking. And so like this was kind of like a running joke that, oh, Amaya's nocturnal and things like that. But I at a very early age caught on that Amaya was literally passing out. So like Amaya was so faint, like so dehydrated or so hungry that she would just fall asleep and literally pass out because I wouldn't be able to wake her up. And so with all of these things kind of culminating, I early on saw that Nadya was also always exhausted. And so I wasn't always able to, you know, go to the bathroom with you like Amaya did. And I don't actually really know what eating disorder type you have, but I very much always just saw that you were having a hard time with your body image. And a lot of times I tried to like intervene like I did with Amaya, but you were always just out of the house because you were at ballet practice, you were at speech and debate, you were working out, you were at the gym, which was, you know, what I realized is because you were like exercising, stuff like that.
Issa, do you think you ever had a struggle with relationship with food, or do you feel like you were always good on it?
No, I have always had a really healthy relationship with food. And I think the only times that I've struggled with food, but whenever I've been in a, the only times that I've had kind of a conflict with food is when I'm with you guys and I have to take your food away from you, or I have to eat your plate because I can see that Amaya's triggered and wants to finish hers, and then I know that she'll go throw up, or I see that Nadya's triggered and she'll hunch over and be stuffing her face with the rest of the food because you have a scarcity mindset still and don't want to leave anything on the plate. Like, for example, we went to Indiana when we got disowned, and Agun made us a pot of everything we had eaten that weekend. Like, he just put literally all the scraps on our plate and just put it into a pot and boiled it for our last meal. There were salmon bones in it, there were potatoes in it, it was water, apples. We had like pieces of white bread in there, soaking bread. It was quite literally the color of puke. It was puke. It was a mixture of foods that have been digested and like were on our plates. And so at the last meal, he put a bunch of scoops into our bowls, and I was very much like, I'm not touching that. I would rather fly 8 hours home and like, you know, be really, really hungry, like, than touch that and literally throw up. And I turned to Amaya and Nadya, and I saw that Amaya was literally gagging. And when Amaya gags, I get really scared that Amaya's gonna throw up. And so when Amaya throws up, it's kind of difficult to snap her out of a, you know, triggered state. And so I saw Amaya literally gagging, so I had to literally fight her bowl away from her. And then I saw Nadya downing this literal vomit soup, downing this vomit soup down her throat because she didn't want to leave anything left in the bowl. And so I had to like fight her bowl away from her, and then I stuffed it in my mouth, being like, you don't need to eat it, I will eat it, which I've had to do on several occasions.
Oh, Lisa.
Like literally yesterday at dinner when we were eating pasta. Like, so my relationship with food is extremely, like, I'm healthy with food, I'm good with food, but when I do kind of overeat, or when I have to think about, like, oh, like, tomorrow I gotta work out a little extra, is when I have to, like, protect you guys from your triggers.
That's what I was wondering, is, like, I feel like food is so coupled with body dysmorphia for me.
Yeah,
Same.
I don't
So
really
coupled.
have that, just because I kind of think of food as, like, something yummy.
I think Issa has a very healthy, like, abundance mindset, which I also think kind of goes back to the fact that a lot of the trauma Amaya and I have from a scarcity mindset, you know, living through these more times when we were facing more poverty, we were old enough to understand, like, the concept of money, right? And I think that, Issa, you have that too, but I think we're so young that you saw what we were going through, but maybe didn't understand, like, why it was happening. In terms of my background, and I know that, like, we haven't really talked about this intensely, and I think a lot of it was because I grew up always thinking I'm not the one with an eating disorder, and Maya has an eating disorder. I don't know what I have. I know that I just don't like my body. But mine is very rooted in scarcity mindset, like, and I don't even think it, and a little bit of body dysmorphia. For me, it was like, I grew up at a really young age always assigning bites of food to dollar values, all the way from, I think, having both of my grandmas around who would be like, so yummy, what are you eating? That's $5, that's $10, $30 food, $30. Like, I always assigned the value of food of that, and I think it was also
not calories.
Not calories, it was money. For me, it was like, this cost this much, this cost this much. And growing up, like, even though we had more stable life as, like, you know, young elementary school, we weren't well off in the fact that, like, it was still very much like we had no money left at the end of the month. Like, it was spent, right? And for me, you know, with mom, we had a young mom who was honestly my age when she had me.
That's crazy.
Who would also tell me about, like, how lucky I was to have food, right? And it was to the point where if we spilled milk, it was sorry cow. There are people, you know, in Africa, or there are people, you know, the people we see on the street who don't have food, you're so lucky to have food. So I think for me at a really young age, I understood food to be of monetary value. And when we moved out to Portland, Oregon, and I was 9, and I think I was old enough to realize, okay, we went from having enough money to not enough money at all right now, where every time we went grocery shopping, mom would be so stressed, cards would get declined, and it was so embarrassing, and we had to put back food, like, not get the food that we wanted to. Mom was always, like, looking for coupons and everything so that we would have food. So for me, then I had a lot of stress about affording food, right? And I think that Amaya at the time, who's eating so much and cooking so much, which I didn't understand. And it would make me really upset when Amaya would cook cookies, because I would be like, we don't need this. Nobody's eating this. Nobody needs to be eating this. Like, I always was really stressed about it from a monetary perspective. So very scarcity mindset. And you know, I remember, like, I simultaneously was so athletic. I was doing hours of dance and ballet every day. I was playing multiple sports. In high school, I was like, I did tennis, I did track, I did baseball, I did ballet. I was never home. I was always working. And again, like, the way that I coped with trauma was, like, I left the house. And, you know, a lot of my trauma was with my parents. And so for me, I coped by like, working nonstop, working out nonstop, but then not nourishing my body. Not because I was stressed about it, but because I was like, we can't afford this. And if I eat this granola bar at home, someone else, like my sisters, aren't going to be able to have it. And I know that this Z bar, you know, Z bar and Cliff bars that my mom would splurge on, like, I would say in my mind, oh, those are like $3 each. So I'm not going to eat that. And then that scarcity mindset around food is also what led me to shoplifting, which was like being so hungry and then feeling like I needed to, like, steal a fucking cheese, a lot of string cheese, Baby Bell cheeses, as Amanda and I joke. Like, I was just hungry, and I felt a lot of guilt around taking food from our own fridge. And I also think that I did struggle with my body, especially doing ballet, where I was told a lot in the dance world that I didn't have the body for ballet because my chest was too big, my arms were big, I was too heavy to be lifted because I was like 120 pounds. And so for me, even though I was pretty underweight, like, on the scheme of what I was comparing myself to, I felt like really not where I was supposed to be. And I think similarly, I got a lot of attention for my body, right? Both from our dad, who thought that I was really sexy, to I was really pretty violently sexually assaulted when I was 16. And a lot of it was kind of made as an excuse to me of, oh, I couldn't help it because you were so hot, you were so sexy. So it was a lot of mixed messaging where I felt like I was being rewarded, and that was a positive thing in terms of what I looked like. And then I started doing a lot of laxatives because I couldn't poop, and then also doing a lot of energy pills that were weight loss pills.
Which I would steal your laxatives.
Yeah, I shoplifted at a young age a lot of like green tea extracts, which are essentially pills or gummies that make you have a lot more energy because it's caffeine, but also are marketed as weight loss pills. So it was like that coupled with laxatives, coupled with working out, being exhausted all the time, not sleeping, having severe insomnia. But at the same time, binge eating whenever there was free food. So for me, again, not feeling like we didn't have enough food. So when I saw food, it was downing food. And I honestly had that mentality until last year when I went to rehab, or a year and a half ago, because I was on speaking tour. So I was either at dining halls where the food felt free at Harvard, and I was eating until I was like so full, or I was not eating when I was traveling because I didn't want to buy airplane food. And then when there was free food at an event, I was downing food. And that was like, I didn't ever care what it tasted like. It was just like any food. But I really don't think I ever labeled it as disordered eating or an eating disorder. And officially it's basically like binge mentality, but about everything. Like binge on food, on like, I don't really do things in moderation, you know, like if I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to become a yoga instructor. It's like everything kind of in an extreme, which is part of BPD too. And like BPD is also feeling empty and filling myself with food. So it's a mixture of a lot of things. And I think this kind of addictive personality, but I think that for me, I never labeled it as an eating disorder because that word always was what Amaya had. And to be honest, like I was such an unsupportive sister when Amaya was going through Cartini, because I think I was also really triggered by a lot of guilt, because the way I was told Amaya had an eating disorder was Amaya has an eating disorder and a lot of it is rooted because of you. And that's what I heard. And whether or not anyone will admit or say that that is what was said, that is what I heard. And I know like even in our family, like I remember hearing that, like, oh, when I was younger, I would give Amaya my food to make her fat. And like, I don't have any recollection of that, but I know, and I'm not questioning that other people, that happened or anything like that.
You told me that.
But like, I don't remember that happening and things like that. So like, I think that for me, I remember I was called into Cartini as part of Amaya's family therapy. And I was so angry and so defensive because I was like, this feels so unfair. Like, why am I being told that I gave my sister an eating disorder? And I had so much guilt. And so I feel like for me, the word eating disorder was always like, that's not what I have. That's what Amaya has. So I'm fine. Like, I don't have an issue. And I was really in denial. And then I got to rehab where it was like, everything I did was monitored. What I ate, there were literal locks on the cabinets. There were very strict eating times. You know, I was very clear on what was portioned. And I think I realized that I had an eating disorder when I knew that there was food in the fridge and it was behind a lock, and I would throw a tantrum because I was so upset and I felt so hungry, but I was not hungry. I had just eaten, but I convinced myself and I feel like I am really hungry. And I still have this, right? Where like, if I'm left alone and there's a lot of snacks in the fridge, like I used to get up at night and go eat food until Henry kind of helped me work through that. But also like, I have a lot of real anxiety when there's leftovers. I can't throw things away. Even if I'm not hungry and there's food left over on the plate, like at brunch today, I'm like, I will eat it. Even if I'm full and I don't want it, I will eat it. If it's 2 things of food, I also can't leave food on the table. Like if it's touched the table, I will eat it off the table. It's like, for me, it's still a food waste thing and a money thing.
It's just like, I hear you talking, it's just kind of like everything you do, like I feel like, yeah, like I do that too.
When we go on family vacations.
But it's not something we've ever talked about. So it's very weird hearing you talk about these things. Like, oh, I did this, or when we were younger, I did this. It was like, those are all things I did, but I didn't know that you were also doing those.
I did.
And
You still did.
Yeah, but I mean, it's weird even hearing you talk about like the athlete things, which by the way, it's like swimming, wrestling, ballet, swimming.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's like the top eating disorder sports. And you're bringing back so many memories of mine, because I think for whenever people ask me about my eating disorder, I just like draw blank, because one, there's a lot of trauma there, but also like I feel like my brain was like so emaciated at that point that I quite literally have like major gaps in my memory.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's
Yeah.
dissociation too. I think a lot of my eating is not conscious eating.
But I
It's-
remember the
yeah.
the hard parts. I was also just like, when you're talking, I was thinking about the fact that what we completely left out was that the height of my eating disorder, which was like 7th, 8th grade, was the same year that we were legally homeless. And it was, just talking about the scarcity and the money, and I was counting calories, but also like a lot of my like stealing food, which I would then go to the Fred Meyer's bathroom, eat in the bathroom, and then purge right after, was like kind of around this whole thing that like my mom was really into this like Michael Phelps diet, and like the whole, like, I was a competitive swimmer at the time, and like Michael Phelps eats like 5,000 to 10,000 calories a day or something, and like that's how much I was eating. And my mom was like, how is she so skinny? Like, you must be working out so much. I was swimming 6 hours a day, like I wasn't home till like 10 p.m. and like I was basically consuming so much food that my mom was spending to like support my like swimming, that was going completely down the drain, which is why I still, struggle with buying food, which I know Nadya does too. It's so hard to go into a freaking Trader Joe's and spend $5 on like a piece of meat, because I'm like so used to wasting that money. And then...
Well, I think about the question a lot about why I don't have an eating disorder and you two do. And it's interesting when you were talking about the timeline, or with what mom said to you when you were growing up, the timeline of our lives kind of line up where my formative years of learning how to eat and learning how to portion my plate at dinner and breakfast was when mom was working a lot, and mom had like 6 jobs or something like that, so she wasn't home a lot. And so a lot of times I had to portion my own meals and kind of had to eat when I'm hungry, or I had to eat when I wanted a snack. So like I learned that on my own a lot, just because mom really wasn't there like during my middle school years,
Which turned out to be a good thing for you.
and so well, in some ways,
Yeah.
And then another thing was that during those years I also had to attend Emmaus Cartini meal meetings,
Which,
like,
Nadya,
at
you
Cartini.
were not at.
And
I wasn't
so,
allowed to go.
Nadya wasn't allowed to go, and so
because I was told I was a trigger. I was a visual trigger for you. So
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm like trying to be like, it's hard because I don't want to get into like a comparative, like angry discussion of this. But like at that time, like we were completely opposed to each other. And like,
No,
you
yeah, we didn't talk.
absolutely
That's what I'm
hated
saying.
me.
So that's
like,
what I'm saying.
I took away my eating disorder and hospitalization, like took away from your college apps. My eating disorder and partial hospitalization wasn't intense enough for you. You told me you wanted, like,
No.
I'm not
So,
angry. You told me
Amanda,
you wanted
this
me
is
to,
why
like,
Nadya
die.
wasn't
Like, it's
allowed.
no, that's why I wasn't allowed to go.
Nadya wasn't allowed to go, so I had to go. And so I had to be in the meetings where this woman, this therapist, was talking at me. How old was I? Like 10?
10.
I was 10.
10 to 12.
And I was sitting in Cartini with like a notepad
13.
and a pen, writing down like what portions of meat you needed, what portions of vegetables you needed, how many cups
Yeah.
to serve you. I had to learn how to translate ounces or pounds into ounces and things like that. And so like at a very young age, I nutritionally, like scientifically knew what portions someone needed to have to survive, and someone needed to have to be healthy, and how to recover from eating disorder. So I was very conscious about what I was eating and what I was putting on my plate, because I was always doing it for you two, like growing up. And so, or I was always doing it for Amaya, and like Nadya, I knew you had an eating disorder, like the whole, like our whole lives. And so the only thing is that I would constantly like talk to my mom about like, Mom, like Nadya is not supposed to be eating this many laxatives. Like, you are spending way too much money on poop tea. Like, no one needs this many laxatives. So like at a very early age, I was so conscious of, okay, like my sister, like everyone jokes the third sister is the least fucked up because the two older ones like fuck up for them. But like I was so conscious about how to portion my plate. I was so conscious about how much to work out, because Nadya, I never saw you because you were at all these things about working out like your body and things like that. And I grew up additionally having to kind of reassure, like I couldn't say the word skinny, I couldn't say the word fat, I couldn't
full.
I wasn't allowed to say
Numbers.
I'm full, I wasn't allowed to say I'm hungry, I wasn't allowed to say like you know,
look healthy.
I want sugar. I wasn't allowed to say you look healthy. God, no. I wasn't allowed to say all of these things. And like my mom and I remember without you two, like had to sit down and list all of these things out and like write down these phrases that I had to say, that I had to memorize to like tell Amaya when she was about to throw up, or I had to memorize these ways to kind of comfort you two when you were in a triggered state. And so like I had to do all of this work to understand eating disorders at such a young age that like I didn't get one. Like I was so conscious of it that I just kind of didn't have time to have an eating disorder because the food that I was eating was your portion food.
I do want, like, I mean, I don't want to blame myself for someone else's eating disorder, but I also do want to say, like, I think, one, so much hurt there, and, like, so much, like, love you, but also, like, I think, I'm thinking about how, you know, my ex-boyfriend from high school, my high school sweetheart, who was also, like, a model, so there's, like, a whole lot there. I remember we had like a really deep conversation midway through our relationship where he was like, I have an eating disorder now and it's your fault. And you gave me an eating disorder because I'm surrounded by you, and like watching you eat food like makes me have an eating disorder, and this is your fault. And like you bestowed me with this like lifelong thing, which, you know, I tell everyone, like, once you have it, you know, like it sucks. Like every time I have girls reach out to me all the time, like, you're so open about it. And like, I'm like, first of all, I'm not recovered. This is a struggle at every meal, every single meal. So it's like, once you have it, I'm like, I'm so sorry. But it's almost like comforting for me to hear that too, because I'm like, I think I still blame myself a lot for like when I'm around people, I feel really scared to like talk about my eating disorder or like show traits, as open as I am about it and as much comfort I give to other people with eating disorders, because I have that like, this is your fault.
It takes a team of people to heal from something like that. And I will say our family is, while little, we are extremely privileged in that we have so much love. Like, we have so much love in between just the four of us. And additionally with Henry, like you said, Henry would catch you. Like, I have on multiple occasions texted Henry, like you were coming home from Indiana, and I was like, sent Henry a text being like, trigger moment, watch Nadya's eating, time it out. And Henry and I would have to talk about that. Same with like your boyfriend. Like, I've had multiple conversations with your guys's external support systems about how to support someone through that, and it can be quite exhausting for someone supporting another person with the eating disorder. Like, I mean, I retook a year of high school. I'm in my 5th year of high school because my 8th grade freshman and sophomore year were kind of learning how to reintegrate myself into a social life where I didn't always have to be watching someone's weight, watching someone's food, watching someone's, you know, like, I didn't have to be on suicide watch. Yeah. So, like, my whole weekends, I wasn't allowed to go out, or I wasn't allowed to have sleepovers, because when my mom was working 3 jobs to, like, you know, put food on the table, like that we had to put portion food on the table, I had to stay home and be on suicide watch. For Amaya. And so, like, kind of for support systems, like, learning how to reintegrate into a world where, you know, someone healing from an eating disorder can be a lot.
Yeah, support systems are so important. I mean, I feel like it's obviously, like, I want to be like, it's so doable. Like, if you're sick and you're struggling, like, you can do it. But, like, honestly, like, from my perspective, I'm like, fuck no. Like, I feel
it's a lot of work.
It's so much work, mental work, but also, like, you need people there for you, and you need people to catch you, you need people to watch you. Like, you need that. At least I needed that surveillance, and, like, to this day I still need that, you know, discussion. My college boyfriend, I was just, like, thinking, like, you're like, you need support, and talking to college boyfriend or Henry, like, I almost wanted to, like, be like, I need to give a shout out for anyone listening who, you know, has a significant other who has, you know, bulimia or an eating disorder, or they have it themselves, to push themselves to have that conversation, you know, about it and be open. What do you need? Like, especially in college, you know, there's a lot of people drinking, a lot of people getting really drunk, and there's this term that I learned literally last year, like pull trig, where when you're so drunk that you force yourself to throw up to get better.
TC, tactical gender. That's what it's nicknamed. TC, tactical gender.
Well, I'm like allergic to alcohol, so I never really like knew that, but I started drinking like literally last year, and I caught my college boyfriend on multiple occasions like pull his friends aside and be like, you can't say that to a Maya, because they would be like, just pull trig, or like
make yourself throw up.
Yeah, or like if somebody was in the bathroom like puking, he'd like pull me out of the bathroom, and like it's those little gestures that like I think, oh my god, like I appreciate so much, like because they just like reminded me of my own past and like reminded me like, oh, that would be really triggering for me if I like threw up right now, so now I have to sit down and just be in my mess. Yeah, you know. But support systems are so important, and like having people there for you to like, you know, curb your triggers. And unfortunately for me, it was my baby sister.
Yeah,
for most of my life.
I mean, I think that like, I mean, Issa, you had to grow up really fast in that, and I also think that, I mean, eating disorders have played such a intense and challenging role in our own family dynamic. Like, Amaya, as you said, I think that even when we talk about eating disorders, like I realize that we have this anger at each other about it, because like,
I mean, I already felt it like when you were talking about yours. I was like, fuck you.
I mean, I think
fuck you.
No,
yeah.
I think that we can all sense it too. Is like, I think when I talk about it, there is this sort of like, but you weren't there for me, and then and you made it worse. And I think for me, like, I have the anger, like I felt like nobody was there for me because there was no focus. Like, obviously, like in everything that I was dealing with, it was like, well, why would you have that issue if you look like that? You're succeeding. You're, you know, you don't have that. Amaya has that. And so I think that for me, like, we obviously have, I think that's always going to be a part of our lives that we're working through, and a part of the anger that we're working through. Absolutely. Too. And I think that it's like, I also think it's a reminder that everybody's healing journey and everybody's disordered eating like looks different, you know? And I think that that's something that I really had to learn, was like, just because mine doesn't look like my sister's, or it wasn't to the same extreme, you know, it isn't less valid. And I think also the vocabulary or needing to label is something also that I had to work through. It was just like, I'm just going to work on my relationship with food. And I think that for me, it's very much linked to like also, like healthy relationship with money, which is obviously something I am working through because of the manipulation I experienced with Dad around money. And I think it's something that like we're all gonna continue working through, right? And I think that, you know, I'm proud of where we are right now, right? We've spent the weekend enjoying really good food. Issa's caught our triggers when she needed to and get us like, you know, snacks when we were hungry.
But like, reminder that is a long-term goal.
Yeah.
Like, I am so lucky to be in like recovery right now, but it is chronic. And I think I remind that for anyone, almost every single person I talk to, especially if they're, you know, a girl, like is like, oh, I have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
This is, or I think I have an eating disorder. I definitely have an eating disorder. Or know
someone who does.
Yeah. And they are chronic. Like, it's not like, oh, I had one. It's like, no, like these are things that are stuck with you. They take different forms. They come in and out of your lives. And that's not something to just accept and let it happen, but it is something to be aware of.
Yeah. And I also think it's like, Issa, you were so fucking strong for having to do that at such a young age, and like be exposed to that, and like have these tough conversations at literally 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And I also think that it says a lot about the relationship between you two, because Issa did bear the brunt of a lot of, I'm not gonna say violence, but I think like aggression, because I think we all had a lot of aggression. And you know, it definitely took a lot for you. Like, you also, like Amaya, missed school and had to redo a year and worked through a lot. And I think that in many ways, when you first started dating, also ended up relationships.
I didn't have to redo a year. I chose to
chose to redo a year to get the most out of high school. Yeah. But I also think that it says a lot that you then had to learn how to have relationships where you weren't a caretaker. Yeah. And where the person you were with wasn't dealing with so much of a,
we're not attracted
that's
to.
Another conversation. The people that I chose to surround myself after you guys left. Yeah. Because I didn't know how to function where I didn't have to be a caretaker. So kind of learning how to, you know, not recreate trauma situations.
Yeah, and I think that, like, again, Amaya, what you said, which is that it's not something you're recovered from, it's a recovery process. And it can look different for everybody. And I think at the same time, like, support network is everything. And I think that the fact that we're sitting here having an open conversation when, like, I don't think we've ever talked about it all together this in depth. And I'm really proud of the fact that like we didn't yell at each other, because I think that like sometimes we do feel that. And I think it's a really big moment for us as sisters to be able to have this conversation, and I'm really proud of us for that. And for all of you listening, again, please reach out to people if you need support. We'll make sure to share resources, to hotlines for support, but also just different opportunities for support. And we'll make sure that we link all of those as well. And I know that there's some incredible organizations doing really great work around eating disorders and awareness around it, and have resources if you're a support network as well. This is actually a topic that's been heavily requested from Tigress audience to talk about. This is the first time I'm talking about it, and I really want to hear feedback and everything. And I hope that this has just been a helpful space. And I hope that, if anything, this can just assure you or friends that you have that you're not alone in this, and that there is hope in working through it, and that being in the recovery process is something that you don't have to be ashamed of.
And little steps are still steps. You know, text that hotline. Like, there's so many peer-to-peer hotlines that are so amazing across the board, especially for ED to suicide to literally anything, that were incredible support network for me. Yeah.
And with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you so much for listening. And sending love to all of you, and just really love you both.
Love you.
Love you. Bye, y'all.